At 1 minute after midnight Eastern Daylight Savings Time this morning, Nikon announced the next S lens for the Nikon Z series, a 24mm 1.8. They also announced the development of the Nikon D6 and a 120 to 300mm f2.8 for it. So what? Hey everybody, I'm Hugh Brownstone for Three Blind Men and an Elephant, and this is going to be super short because while these are only announcements, and I can't tell you anything about how any of these products actually perform in real life, I can tell you what it is that I think we're seeing and why what we're seeing is really important. So let's start with the Nikkor Z 1.8, which just happens to be my favorite wide-angle field of view. This is the fourth moderately fast, moderately priced prime from Nikon for its Z series cameras. At just 450 grams and $1,000, I suspect it will yield image quality somewhere between that of the stellar, absolutely stellar, $600 50mm 1.8 and the merely excellent $850 35 1.8. I haven't yet gone hands-on with the $800 85 1.8 just announced. If it does, this quartet convinces me that it's time to stand up and say unabashedly that among the new mirrorless full-frame entrants, Nikon has far and away absolutely nailed its mirrorless lens priorities, early reactions on the web notwithstanding. I'm talking not only prioritizing and delivering optical performance in terms of sharpness and contrast, but in terms of physical correction of chromatic aberration and management of focus breathing, as well as fast, quiet, and smooth autofocus performance. I'm talking not only about eschewing the size, weight, and price of 1.4 or faster primes for more accessible 1.8s, but prioritizing them higher than Holy Trinity 2.8 zooms. I'm talking about not only embracing 21st century optical design, but embracing 21st century materials science and the 21st century reality of hybrid shooting and breaking free of traditional notions of what a pro lens should look or feel like. Nikon, bravo. Bravo for using the opportunity of this new mount to make our bread and butter optics meaningfully better than what previously existed at relatively aggressive price points in these days, instead of wasting time on halo products that few people will buy. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who will still complain about 1.8 maximum apertures, as if a 1.4, 1.2, or 0.95 somehow makes a person a pro. You think 1.8 isn't shallow or fast enough? Well, you may be right. But have you calculated or compared the actual differences between 1.4 and 1.8 at the subject to sensor distances you work most often? Because I have. Have you calculated the percentage of your shots for which that 2/3 of a stop difference will truly matter? Because for the work we do, I have. Again, your mileage may vary, and that's fine. When I look at the best of the rest, Nikon's competitors, what Nikon has done with this glass comes into really sharp relief. Let's start with a few of its full-frame competitors. Sony's 24mm 1.4 G Master. This is gorgeous, brilliant, compact, light. I love it. Weighs a few grams less than the Z 1.8, 445 to 450, and also manages to be about 10% less bulky, but the Sony is 40% more expensive. Canon's 24mm 1.4 L2, for many years an industry benchmark, is a touch bulkier than the Z, just a touch, but it's almost 50% heavier, and it is 50% more expensive. Sigma's 24 1.4 Art in F-mount is optically excellent and costs $150 less than the Z, but it's also almost 50% heavier. And I suspect the Z will focus faster, smoother, and more quietly, to be determined. The really interesting comparison is when we turn our attention to crop sensor lenses. They are tiny, which I really, really like, but cost just as much as the full-frame Z. Fujifilm 16mm 1.4, one of my favorite lenses of all time. Not only does it have an aperture ring, but a manual focus clutch with hard stops. It's 35% smaller and 16% lighter than the Z 1.8, but costs the same $1,000. Yet, with that 1.4 maximum aperture, yields about the same shallowest depth of field as the 24 does on the Z at f2. Leica DG Summilux 12mm f1.4 for our GH5, even smaller, 42% smaller than the Z and 25% lighter, but the same $1,000. Finally, Sony's own crop sensor sonar 24mm f1.8 is almost 50% lighter and almost 60% smaller. Same $1,000. Of course, as I alluded to earlier, we'll have to see how the 24 1.8Z actually performs, but I really can't wait to go hands-on. Maybe I'm just projecting, but it feels like Nikon has approached mirrorless with wisdom, humility, and respect for its audience. So again, bravo. Now, let's turn our attention even more briefly to the D6 and the 120 to 300 2.8 development announcements made at the same time. First, these are clearly nods to the 2020 Olympics. The D5 is the current pinnacle of Nikon's lineup, specifically in terms of autofocus speed and reliability, burst rate and buffer, build quality, and price. The D6 should be even faster, focus even more surely, and do other stuff better. Otherwise, why bother? As for the 120 to 300 2.8, from its focal range and maximum aperture to its timing, it's equally clear that this is precisely the kind of fast, flexible optic designed for sports. But there are questions to be asked. A, will the D6 also be a more capable hybrid than the D5? Or will it be built solely for stills? I can see the pros and cons of either, as well as the implications for R&D priorities. B, will the D6 be faster and or more capable than whatever version of the mirrorless Sony A9, remember the D6 is a DSLR, released in time for the games too? Will it be better than whatever Canon does for the games? This is every bit as nail-biting a question as any of the Olympic events in my book. C, how much better will this new F-mount glass be than what Nikon already has? D, will it be designed from the outset with a Z variant, or at least IBIS in mind, given that the Z has in-body image stabilization and thus requires something slightly in excess of traditional 35mm coverage from the lens anyway? Will the D6 have IBIS? Will they, and if so, how will they address the inherent blackout of a mirror reflex design? Is it time to go helical? And E, what does this development announcement mean? What does it portend? We'll have to wait for answers, but we can conjecture answers at least to these last two questions. First, it is a message to legacy Nikon DSLR shooters that Nikon remains committed to them, an effort to blunt defections to other brands, I'd say. Second, Nikon thinks there is still a future, a business case, to invest in their legacy portfolio. That's kind of interesting. Third, perhaps Nikon is hedging its bets on mirrorless, thinking a day may come when people return to DSLRs. That's interesting too. Lastly, for now, and most interesting, maybe Nikon believes that it is too risky to assume they can close the performance gap between their own full-frame mirrorless and current DSLR offerings and Sony's flagship A9, again, whatever version they have available on July 24th, 2020. With less than 11 months to go, I'd say that's a reasonable concern. But for now, I remain really enamored of what Nikon is doing with their Z system. And get this, B&H is selling refurbished Z6s for $1,400, $1,800 with their 24 to 74. If you're leaning Z, hey, if you're leaning full frame generally or high-end APS-C, I'd take a really close look right now, while they still have them. If you like what you've seen here today, please give a thumbs up, subscribe, join the conversation below. You guys continue to be just incredible, knowledgeable, inspiring, funny. I mean, you're a joy, truly. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Grab one or both of our new Hold That Thought t-shirts you wanted us to put up at our new 3BMEPthreadless.com store. Support our work by using our affiliate links down below in the show notes, dropping us coffee money via our PayPal link down below in the show notes, or even better than that, we invite you to become a patron of our work over at Patreon. Link down below. We've created our Patreon page because we are stoked to bring you not only gear reviews, but with our What Were You Thinking and Good World Gone Bad series, historical, educational, artistic morsels, and longer form conversations, not interviews, with world-class photographers, curators, gallery owners, keepers of the legacy, folks like Elliot Irwitt, Anya Sear, Mark Lubell, Etheline Staley, and friends like Brian Smith, Paul Giroux, Nino Rakicevic, and more. We'd really like you to join us to deliver this kind of content regularly. Your support on Patreon will really help us ramp it up. In which case, as always, we thank you for it. That's it. For Three Blind Men and an Elephant, I'm Hugh Brownstone. See you next time.